It was an ordinary night, or so I thought. The kind of night that should have been uneventful, quiet, calm. The world outside my window swallowed by the endless night. I had just finished a long day at work and was looking forward to the comfort of my bed, the silence of the room, and the peaceful rest I desperately needed. But that night, something changed. I didn't notice at first, not until I heard it. A sound, faint, almost imperceptible, but still distinct. It was the softest rustle, like fabric brushing against skin. I assumed it was the wind, perhaps a stray gust creeping through the old, cracked windows of my apartment. The wind had a way of doing that, creeping in with no warning, unsettling the stillness. But this time, the air didn't feel right. It was heavier, colder. I stood up to close the window, brushing aside the uneasy feeling that tugged at me. As I reached the window, I saw it. A shadow. It wasn't from any of the streetlights below, nor from anything in my apartment. It was something else entirely. I froze, my hands still resting on the window latch. The shadow moved, fluid and almost impossibly fast, darting across the alleyway below like a wisp of smoke. For a brief moment, it seemed to hover in the air, watching, waiting. Then, without warning, it vanished. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to dismiss it, that it was just a trick of the light, or maybe the effect of exhaustion playing with my senses. But something told me it wasn't. I tried to shake the feeling off, closing the window with a force I didn't realize I had. But the uneasy sensation lingered. I turned off the lights, determined to put the strange encounter behind me and get some sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside seemed louder now, more oppressive. I tossed and turned, the images of the shadow flickering in my mind like a broken film reel. Then, just as I was about to drift off, I heard it again. The soft rustle, the quiet sound that should have been nothing but now felt like an invitation. I sat up, my breath shallow, my eyes scanning the darkness of the room that now felt too small, too suffocating. And then I saw it, a figure, not in the window this time, but in the doorway, standing just beyond the reach of the light. A silhouette, tall, thin, and impossibly still. Its presence was suffocating. The air seemed to freeze around it. It didn't move, didn't speak, but it was there. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The door was still closed. There was nothing there. No trace of the figure that had just filled the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. I was left in the silence, shaken to my core, unsure if what I had seen had been real. But I knew one thing for sure. That wasn't the last time I would see it. The night passed, but it felt like an eternity. The shadow, that strange presence in my doorway, haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. When morning finally arrived, I convinced myself it was nothing more than a trick of my imagination. A bad dream, perhaps, or the result of too much stress. I tried to go about my day as normal, but the unease lingered like a weight pressing on my chest. Every little noise, every whisper of wind, felt like a sign that I was being followed, that something was lurking just beyond my reach. I had to get out. The apartment, the streets, everything felt suffocating. I decided to go for a walk, to clear my head. The sun was setting as I wandered through the quiet streets, the orange glow of twilight casting long shadows on the pavement. I tried to lose myself in the routine of walking, to find some semblance of peace, but the oppressive feeling never left. And that's when I saw it again. At first, I thought it was just a person, a passerby walking in the distance. But as I took a closer look, I realized that it wasn't. The figure was too tall, too still. It didn't move like a human, didn't walk with the natural grace of someone simply out for a stroll. It glided, its movements unnaturally smooth, almost as if it were floating just above the ground. My heart raced. The figure was looking directly at me. I couldn't tell its features. Its face was obscured by the shadow of its hood, but I could feel its gaze, piercing through the distance. It was like a pressure in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet felt frozen to the ground, as if some invisible force was holding me there. The figure continued to approach, each step measured and deliberate. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it disappeared into the alleyway, vanishing like smoke. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I didn't know if I should feel relieved or terrified. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as another figment of my imagination, but another part of me knew that I was not alone, that something was hunting me, something I couldn't explain. I rushed home, hoping to shake the feeling, to lock myself in and forget about the strange figure. But when I stepped inside, the air was thick with the same oppressive silence. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed something strange on the floor. A footprint. Not just any footprint, but one that was fresh, as if someone had stepped into my apartment while I was gone. I crouched down, my fingers trembling as I traced the edges of the print. It was large, far too large to be mine. The shape was odd, almost elongated, as though the foot that made it didn't belong to any human I knew. And it was damp, as if the person or thing that had made it had just walked in moments before. I backed away, my pulse pounding in my ears. That's when I heard it again. The rustling sound, faint but unmistakable, coming from the shadows of the hallway. I turned toward it, every muscle in my body tense with fear. But once again, there was nothing there, just darkness. But this time I could feel it, the presence, the weight of it pressing against me, like it was just waiting for me to make a move, to make a mistake. And then, as if sensing my fear, the silence was broken. A voice, low and gravelly, echoed through the darkness. "You can't hide from me." The voice seemed to come from everywhere, surrounding me, filling the room with a cold, biting chill. I froze, my throat dry, unable to speak. The shadow was closer now. I could feel it, just beyond the threshold of the door. It was waiting, watching. And then, without warning, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. The figure was coming for me. The footsteps were getting closer. Each one echoed in the silence, slow, deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed myself against the wall, barely daring to breathe. I could feel the temperature drop, a coldness that seemed to seep into my very bones, chilling me to the core. I tried to move, to run, but my legs felt like lead, too heavy to lift. It was as if something was holding me in place, binding me to the spot. I could hear the rustling again, the soft movement of something just beyond the doorway. I didn't dare to look, afraid of what I might see. But then, a whisper soft, almost tender, reached my ears. "I've been watching you for so long, waiting for the right moment." The voice, it was unmistakable now, rich and dark, with an edge that sent shivers down my spine. It was inhuman, almost seductive, like it was pulling at something deep within me. I wanted to scream, to run, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was listen, paralyzed by the sound of that voice, the sense of inevitability. "You've felt it, haven't you? The pull, the hunger. It's been inside you since the moment I first saw you." My blood ran cold. The pull, the hunger. My mind raced as I struggled to understand what it all meant. This wasn't just a random encounter, wasn't some strange hallucination. No, this was something much darker, something ancient. The footsteps stopped, just outside the doorway. For a moment, everything was still. The air felt thick, oppressive, like it was holding its breath, waiting. And then, slowly, the door creaked open. I didn't look at it, couldn't. I could feel its presence now, a looming darkness, as if it was standing right in front of me, just beyond my line of sight. It was like the room had grown smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating me with the weight of its gaze. I forced myself to look up, and that's when I saw it. There, standing in the doorway, was the figure I had seen before. But this time, it wasn't a shadow. It was real, solid. Its features were sharper now, more defined. I could see its pale skin, almost translucent, stretched taut over high cheekbones. Its eyes dark, endless, glowing with an unnatural light, locked onto mine, and for a moment, I thought I might drown in them. They were eyes that belonged to something not of this world, something that had lived for centuries, that had seen things no mortal should ever witness. The vampire's lips curled into a slow, predatory smile. "You're afraid, aren't you? You can feel the hunger in me. It's the same hunger you've been feeling for days now. It's calling to you. Couldn't look away." There was something magnetic about it, something that made my heart race and my breath hitch. Its presence was overpowering, filling the room with an energy that I couldn't escape. The air around me seemed to thrum with an ancient power, one that was far older than anything I had ever known. "You think you can run from me?" the vampire whispered, its voice dripping with amusement. "But you can't. I will find you no matter where you hide. You are mine now." The last word hung in the air like a curse, a weight that pressed down on me. I was frozen, trapped in its gaze, unable to move, unable to scream. It took a step forward, and I could feel the coldness radiating from it, seeping into my skin. I wanted to run. I wanted to fight, but every instinct in my body told me that I couldn't escape, that this was inevitable. It was as if I had been drawn into its world, its darkness, and now there was no way out. "You think this is just a nightmare," the vampire continued, its voice low and seductive. "But it's real. I am real." And with that, it stepped closer, its cold fingers reaching out, grazing my skin. In that moment, everything changed. The world around me seemed to blur, the air thickening, becoming suffocating. I could feel the vampire's presence inside me, like it was rooting itself deep into my soul, twisting and pulling at something I didn't understand. And then, it leaned in, its lips brushing against my ear, its breath cold against my skin. "Welcome to eternity." I could feel it, the coldness in my veins, creeping up from the spot where the vampire's fingers had touched me. It wasn't just the chill in the air that made me tremble. It was something far deeper. It was as though the very essence of the vampire was seeping into my blood, taking hold of me, drawing me closer to it. I wanted to scream, to tear away, but my body wouldn't obey. The vampire's breath was still against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. "You're mine now," it whispered again, each word slicing through me like a sharp blade. "There's no escape." I could feel my heart racing, faster and faster, the sound deafening in my ears. The room, once a place of safety, now felt like a cage, a trap closing in around me. The walls seemed to shift, distort, as though they were alive, breathing, closing in with every passing second. I wanted to fight. I had to fight. But how? How could I fight against something like this? The vampire stepped back, slowly, its eyes never leaving mine. Its smile was full of dark satisfaction, as if it knew exactly how powerless I felt. I could see the hunger in its eyes, the ancient need that drove it, and yet, there was something else there too, something more than just thirst. "You don't understand, do you?" the vampire asked, its voice soft now, almost coaxing. "This hunger, it isn't just about feeding, it's about joining." My mind raced, trying to make sense of its words. Joining? Was it talking about turning me into one of them? A vampire? Was that the fate I was facing? A part of me wanted to deny it, wanted to believe that I could escape, that this was just some twisted dream. But another part of me, the part that had felt the cold fingers on my skin, the part that felt the hunger clawing at me from within, knew that there was no escaping this. The vampire continued, its voice growing more intense, more insistent. "You can feel it, can't you? The thirst inside you is already beginning. It doesn't matter how much you resist. The change has already begun. The weight of its words hit me like a blow. The thirst, I could feel it now, deep in my gut, a gnawing, burning hunger that wasn't there before. It was foreign, wrong, but at the same time familiar, like something that had been inside me all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. I took a step back, my chest heaving with panic. My mind was a whirl of confusion, but the sensation of that hunger, that need, it was overwhelming. The vampire's grin widened as it saw my struggle. "You can't stop it," it said, its voice dripping with a dark promise. "Once it takes hold, it never lets go, and you'll want it. You'll beg for it. You'll crave it more than anything else." I wanted to scream, to deny it, but my body was betraying me. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The cold that had touched me before was now coursing through my veins, spreading, infecting me with a terrible desire. The vampire's presence was like a storm inside my head, drowning out everything else, leaving only the hunger behind. I looked at the vampire, its face still concealed by shadows, but I could feel its power. It was immense, ancient, and far beyond anything I could comprehend. And then I saw it, its eyes, the deep, glowing red that shimmered with an otherworldly light. They pierced through the darkness, locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "Join me," the vampire whispered, its voice now a silky, seductive purr. "Embrace the hunger. Embrace what you were always meant to be." Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could feel was the pull, the overwhelming, suffocating pull of its gaze, its hunger, as it reached out to consume me. But just as I thought I would lose myself completely, something snapped inside me. A fleeting thought, a memory, something from deep within me that I couldn't quite grasp. I remembered something my grandfather had told me once, a warning, a story he'd whispered in my ear when I was a child. Never trust the darkness. Never trust the eyes that shine with the hunger of the night. It was a desperate, fragile hope, but in that moment it was enough. With every ounce of strength I had left, I tore my gaze away from the vampire, snapping myself out of the trance, shaking off the lure of the hunger. The coldness inside me was still there, but I fought it, pushed it down with everything I had. The vampire's expression faltered for the first time, a flicker of confusion crossing its face. It took a step forward, its fingers outstretched, but I moved back, away from it, forcing myself to stay focused. "You're not going to win," I said, my voice hoarse but determined. "I won't let you turn me into one of you." The vampire stared at me, its lips curling into a smirk, as if it was amused by my defiance. But there was something else in its eyes now, something darker, more dangerous. "Then we shall see," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "But you're already mine, and it's only a matter of time before you surrender." I couldn't keep running. The vampire's words echoed in my mind, its voice a constant reminder of the terror I felt, and the hunger that was now part of me. It was inside me, buried deep, gnawing at my insides, urging me to surrender, to give in. But I refused. I refused to become like it, to give up my humanity, to let the darkness consume me. I stumbled backward, my mind a whirl of fear and confusion. The vampire watched me, its eyes burning with an almost predatory hunger. It knew I could feel it, that I was struggling, but it was enjoying the fight. "Don't you understand?" the vampire said, its voice calm, almost soothing. "You don't have a choice anymore. You're already marked. You're already mine." I shook my head, taking another step back, trying to steady my breathing. I had to stay strong. I had to hold onto the last remnants of myself. The vampire tilted its head, watching me intently, as if studying me, waiting for me to break. But I wouldn't. Not yet. "You think you can fight it," it said, its smile widening. But the blood doesn't lie. It calls to you. It's all you'll ever want from now on. I could feel it again, that thirst. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a need. The ache inside me, like an empty pit in my chest, that could only be filled with blood. My stomach twisted. My skin tingled with the hunger. I clutched my chest, trying to ignore it, but it was getting harder and harder to resist. I turned away, refusing to let it see how much its words were affecting me. But the vampire wasn't done yet. It moved closer, its presence overwhelming, filling the room with a suffocating aura. I could hear its breath now, slow, deliberate, like it was savoring the moment. "You think you can escape," it said, its voice barely above a whisper. "But the blood will call you back. It will always call you back." I turned to face it, fury rising in my chest. "I'm not like you," I spat. "I'll never be like you." The vampire's smile didn't falter. It was the smile of a predator, of something ancient and powerful. "Oh, you already are," it whispered, its eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. "It's in your blood now. You can't fight what you are. You can't fight what I made you." Suddenly, the vampire moved with terrifying speed. It was upon me in the blink of an eye, its cold fingers wrapping around my wrist. The chill of its touch burned, sending a wave of dread through my body. I gasped, struggling against its grip, but it was like trying to break free from stone. "You can run," it said, its voice low and dangerous. "But you can't hide from yourself." I could feel its breath against my neck, the cold air seeping into my skin. My heart pounded, my pulse racing. It was here, right here, so close. The temptation to give in, to let it sink its fangs into my throat and fill the gnawing emptiness inside me, was almost too much to bear. But then, a memory flashed in my mind. My grandfather's warning. His words had been so clear, so strong. "You have the strength to resist. The blood may call, but you are stronger than it. You are not its slave." I held on to that memory, that fleeting feeling of defiance, as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling into the abyss. My mind cleared for a moment, and I saw the vampire for what it truly was, a creature of darkness, of lies, and of endless hunger. With all the strength I had left, I shoved it away, stumbling back, gasping for breath. The vampire's grip loosened, but it didn't let go entirely. "Do you really think you can fight me?" the vampire asked, its voice dripping with contempt. "You are nothing compared to what I am." I didn't reply, couldn't, but I knew one thing for sure. Couldn't let it win. Not now, not ever. The vampire took a step back, its eyes narrowing, studying me with a mix of amusement and something else, something darker. "You're stronger than I thought," it said, its voice almost impressed. "But you will break. In the end, everyone does." And just like that, it was gone, vanished into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me standing alone in the dark, trembling, breathless, but still alive. I collapsed against the wall, my hands shaking as I tried to process what had just happened. The hunger, the thirst was still there, gnawing at me, but I had fought it off for now. But I knew this wasn't over. The vampire would be back. It would always be back. And when it came, it would come for what was mine. I couldn't escape it. The hunger, the thirst. It was growing stronger, more insistent, like an old wound reopening. Every heartbeat, every breath I took, was a reminder of the monster inside me, clawing at the edges of my consciousness, urging me to give in. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. For the past few days, I tried to keep myself busy, to drown out the constant gnawing hunger. But it was impossible. I had been marked, and there was no way to undo what had been done. The vampire's touch, its presence, had left something inside me. A dark seed that grew with every passing moment. I couldn't keep running, though. It was only a matter of time before the vampire came for me again. I knew that, but it was hard to be prepared when every moment was a battle. A battle battle against myself, against what I had become. I could feel the change inside me, deep in my bones. My senses were sharper, more attuned to the world around me. Sounds were louder, colors more vivid. Even the smallest movements, the faintest shifts in the air, seemed to stand out. It was like I could hear everything. The ticking of a clock, the whisper of the wind, the beat of my own heart, now too loud in my ears. But with every new ability, there was a price. The thirst grew worse. The need for blood became unbearable. I tried to ignore it, to push it down, but the longer I resisted, the more desperate I became. Every time I looked at someone, I could see the pulse beneath their skin. I could smell the blood, the warm, intoxicating scent that called to me. It was maddening. And then, one night, it happened. I was walking home, my thoughts a swirling mess of confusion and fear, when I saw him, the vampire. He was waiting for me, just outside the alleyway, his figure dark against the flickering streetlight. His eyes gleamed with that same cold hunger, that same predatory look. "You knew this moment would come," he said, his voice as smooth as ever, laced with a dark amusement. "You've been running from it, but now you have no choice. You're mine. Your blood is mine." I froze. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't move. His presence was suffocating, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. My body ached, my pulse quickened, and all I could think about was the hunger that was threatening to take control. The vampire stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You've tried to resist it, but you can't. The blood calls and you'll answer. You'll become one of us, whether you want to or not." I shook my head, my mouth dry. "I won't become like you. I won't. I can't." He laughed, the sound low and chilling, like something ancient and cruel. "You already are. You just don't know it yet." I stumbled backward, desperate to put some distance between us, but my legs felt weak, my vision blurred, and the hunger, it was unbearable. The vampire moved with lightning speed, grabbing me by the wrist and pulling me close. His grip was like iron, cold and unyielding. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered, his voice almost tender. "You feel the hunger rising within you. It's like a fire, burning, consuming you from the inside out. You don't have to fight it anymore. You don't have to be afraid. Just give in. Let it take over." I felt his breath against my neck, cold and intoxicating. The hunger within me screamed for release, for blood. My body trembled, my hands clawing at my chest as I tried to fight it, tried to keep my humanity intact. But it was too much. The pain was too great. And then, just as the vampire's fangs brushed against my neck, something inside me snapped. With a sudden burst of strength, I pushed him away, breaking free from his grasp. The hunger, the bloodlust, was still there, but something in me had awakened. Something stronger than the vampire's pull. My fear, my will to survive. "You can't have me," I said, my voice shaking but defiant. "I will not let you win." The vampire stared at me, his eyes burning with fury. But I could see something else there now, a flicker of uncertainty. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me to resist so fiercely. "You're strong," he said, his voice a low growl. "But it won't last. You will fall. You will become one of us. It's only a matter of time." With that, he turned and vanished into the night, leaving me alone in the dark. I stood there for a long time, breathing heavily, my hands trembling. The hunger was still there, clawing at me from the inside, but I had fought it, for now. But I knew the vampire was right. It was only a matter of time. Sooner or later, the hunger would consume me, and when it did, I would have to make a choice. A choice that would change everything. The days blurred together, each one indistinguishable from the last. The hunger, the thirst, it never went away. It gnawed at me constantly, an insistent reminder that I was no longer human. The vampire had been right. I had been marked and there was no escaping it. But I couldn't give in. I couldn't become one of them. I spent my days in a haze, moving from place to place, never staying too long in one spot. I avoided people, kept to the shadows, trying to hide the growing darkness inside me. But it was getting harder and harder to control. The vampire's words haunted me, echoing in my mind at every turn. You will fall. You will become one of us. His promise wasn't a threat anymore. It was the truth. One night, as I wandered through the city, I felt it again. That pull. That insatiable hunger. It was like a fire burning in my chest, consuming me from the inside out. My hands trembled, my vision blurred, and I could feel the bloodlust rising, clawing its way to the surface. I needed to feed. I had to. The streets were empty, quiet, but I could hear the faintest pulse, the sound of blood flowing through veins. It was everywhere. The city was alive with it. I could smell it, feel it, and the temptation was overwhelming. I fought it. I had to fight it, but it was so hard. I felt like I was drowning in the need for blood, in the overwhelming, all-consuming desire to satisfy it. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, the vampire. He was standing in the shadows, watching me, his eyes glowing with that same predatory gleam. You think you can run from it, he said, his voice low and mocking. But you can't. It's inside you. You're mine, and nothing can change that. I took a step back, my breath shallow, my heart pounding in my chest. The hunger was unbearable now, clawing at my throat, demanding to be fed. You're right, I said, my voice shaking. I can't fight it anymore, but I won't let you turn me into one of you. The vampire's lips curled into a smile. You already are one of us. You just don't know it yet. His words were like a slap to the face. The truth hit me like a wave, crashing over me, drowning me. I had been resisting, fighting, but the vampire had been right all along. The change had already started. It was in my blood now. I could feel it. I could feel it in every breath I took, in every beat of my heart. But there was something else inside me, too. Something that wouldn't give up. Something that wouldn't let the darkness take over. I looked at the vampire, my eyes burning with a mix of fear and defiance. What do you want from me? I want you to embrace your true nature, he said, stepping closer. I want you to accept what you are. You were always meant to be one of us. You are the future of our kind. I could feel his presence closing in around me, his cold fingers reaching out, but something inside me snapped. I couldn't do it. Couldn't let him win. I couldn't become a monster. With everything I had left, I turned and ran, my legs pushing me faster than I thought possible. The hunger roared inside me, but I ignored it. I focused on one thing and one thing only: survival. I didn't know how far I ran, or how long it took, but eventually, I stopped. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body trembling with exhaustion. But I knew I couldn't stop. Not now. I had to make a choice. I had to decide who I was going to be. Would I give in to the hunger, to the vampire, and join him in the darkness? Or would I fight, no matter the cost, and hold on to what little humanity I had left? The answer came in the form of a voice, deep and chilling, that echoed through the alleyway. You can't outrun what you are. It was the vampire again. I had been running, but I was running straight into his trap. I turned, facing him, the hunger inside me threatening to consume me. It was now or never. I had one final choice to make. Would I give in and let the darkness take me? Or would I fight and face the consequences of defying the very creature that had marked me for death? I was cornered. The vampire stood before me, blocking the path, his eyes glowing with that all-knowing gaze. His smile was cruel, but there was something else there now. Something darker, more menacing. You think you can run, he said, his voice calm, almost as if he were speaking to a child. But you've already made your choice. The blood is inside you. You belong to me. I could feel it. The bloodlust. It was rising inside me again. Stronger than ever. It was like a living, breathing thing inside my chest, clawing at my insides, begging for release. The thirst, the hunger, it was unbearable. I stepped back, my legs trembling, trying to find some control. But the more I tried to resist, the worse it got. The urge to give in, to allow the darkness to consume me, was overwhelming. I could feel my fangs beginning to emerge, my vision blurring, my senses sharpening. The vampire took a step forward, his hand outstretched, the power he wielded almost tangible. "It's not too late," he whispered, his voice thick with temptation. "You can join me. We can rule this world together. We could have everything." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the pull of his words, the lure of the power he offered. But it was hard, so hard. Everything inside me wanted to reach out and embrace it, to embrace him. But something stopped me, the memory of my family, of everything I had lost. It came rushing back, the life I had once had, the person I used to be. I wasn't just going to let it all slip away. Couldn't. "I won't become like you," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I won't let you take me." The vampire's smile faded, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. "You're running out of time. The hunger will break you. It always does." I could feel it. The last shred of my humanity was hanging by a thread. The hunger was swallowing me whole, threatening to consume everything I had left. And then I saw it. Something in the distance. A flash of movement. Something or someone stepping out of the shadows. Someone who wasn't the vampire. The figure appeared, moving toward us. It was faint, almost ethereal, but it was there. And the vampire saw it too. His expression shifted from arrogance to confusion. A flicker of fear crossing his face. "Who are you?" the vampire demanded, his voice no longer filled with the same confidence. "What do you want?" The figure stepped closer, their form becoming clearer. They were tall, cloaked in shadow, their face hidden by a hood. But there was something about them, something I couldn't quite place. The vampire's eyes narrowed, his fangs showing, ready for a fight. "This doesn't concern you." But the figure didn't answer. They simply raised a hand, and the air seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself bent around them. The vampire recoiled, as though something invisible was pushing against him, holding him back. I stood frozen, unsure of what was happening. But one thing was clear. This figure was not afraid of the vampire, and they were not here to join him. The figure turned to me, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You are not alone," they said, their voice soft but firm. "There is still a choice. You don't have to give in." I felt a surge of hope, a flicker of something more powerful than the hunger coursing through me. The vampire growled, a low, animalistic sound. "You cannot save him," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "He's already mine. No one can stop what's coming." The figure did not respond. They simply took another step forward, their presence radiating power. The vampire faltered, unable to move, as though something was holding him back. And that's when I felt it. A shift, a pull like a magnetic force. The vampire snarled, frustrated, but the figure's gaze remained unwavering. "I don't have much time," the figure said, their eyes fixed on me. "Make your choice. The vampire can offer you power, immortality, or you can choose the path of redemption." I didn't know what to say, what to do. The vampire's words had a part of me, but this was different. There was something more in this figure's presence, something that spoke to the core of my being. I felt my fangs retract, the hunger still there but weaker, as though I could breathe again. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The vampire looked between us, his face twisted with rage. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. "You will regret this." But before he could act, The figure raised their hand again, and the air around us grew still. The vampire recoiled, his eyes wide, a mix of confusion and fear flashing across his face. And then, without warning, he vanished into the shadows, retreating into the night. I stood there, breathing heavily, unsure of what had just happened. The figure remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "It's not over," they said. "The choice is yours, but the consequences will be great. Be ready. The darkness is always waiting." With that, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone once again. The hunger still called to me, but now I was not alone. And I knew one thing for sure: the vampire wasn't done with me. He would return, and when he did, I would have to make my final choice. What do you think the figure wants? Will our protagonist give in to the darkness or find a way to escape the vampire's grasp? What choice will they make in the end? The vampire was gone, for now, but his presence lingered, a constant weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me with the hunger that was threatening to consume everything I had left. I knew that the vampire's words were true. It was only a matter of time before I would fall, but I couldn't let it happen. Not yet. I turned and stumbled away, trying to get as far as I could from the place where I'd faced the vampire. My mind was spinning, my thoughts a blur. I had to find a way out. I had to find a way to choose my own fate, not let the darkness take over. I walked for what felt like hours, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets, my body trembling with every step. The hunger was still there, clawing at my insides, but I pushed it aside. Couldn't give in. Not now. As I turned a corner, I saw him again. The figure. The one who had intervened before, the one who had saved me, or at least that's what I thought at the time. I couldn't remember much about him, only that he had appeared when the vampire was about to claim me. He was standing in the shadows, just as he had been before, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He didn't speak at first, just watched me with an intensity that felt almost familiar. I was both relieved and terrified to see him again. Relieved because he had kept me alive. Terrified because I had no idea who he really was. "You've made a choice," he said, his voice low and calm, as if the battle I just fought meant nothing at all. "But you're running out of time." I took a step back, my breath shallow. "What do you mean? What do you want from me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer, his presence more overwhelming than before. He was silent for a moment, his gaze locked onto mine, and then he spoke again. "The vampire was right about one thing," he said softly. "You have a choice, but that choice is not between surrender and defiance. It's not about fighting the hunger or joining the darkness. The choice you face is much more complicated than that." I frowned, confused. "What are you talking about? You are not like the others," he said, his tone sharp, almost accusing. "You've been marked, yes, but you were not meant to be a mere vessel for the vampire's power. You were chosen for something greater." I felt a chill run through me, my heart skipping a beat. Chosen? By who? By what? He hesitated, as if unsure how much to reveal. "The vampire's blood runs through your veins now, but so does the blood of something else. Something far older. Something that you were born to protect." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. "This doesn't make sense. What do you mean? What am I supposed to protect?" The figure stepped closer still, his face just inches from mine. His eyes were burning with intensity, but there was something else there, something kind beneath the surface. "You were meant to stop the vampire, to end the plague he has started. The darkness he spreads. It will consume the world unless someone rises up to fight him. And that someone is you." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. "I can't. I'm not strong enough. I'm not him." "You are," he said firmly. "You just don't know it yet. The vampire may have marked you, but you are not his. You are something far more powerful than he could ever imagine." The blood inside you, it calls to something greater than him. The hunger inside me flared, stronger than ever. I could hear the beat of my own heart, the thrum of blood beneath my skin. And in the silence that followed, I felt it again. That pull, that call of the darkness. But this time, it wasn't the vampire's hunger. It was something else. Something ancient. Something that had always been inside me, waiting. I can't do this alone, I whispered, my voice trembling. I need help. I don't know how to fight this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The figure took a deep breath, his gaze softening. You won't be alone. There are others like you. Those who have been chosen to stop the vampire. Together we can end this. Together we can fight the darkness. I looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception. But I saw none. There was no lie in his voice, no trickery in his words. He believed in me. You will have to make a choice, he continued, his voice steady. You can continue to run, to fight this, or you can embrace what you were always meant to be. The battle is not just for your soul. It's for the future of this world. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. The vampire was still out there, waiting, and I couldn't keep running forever. I had to make my choice. But the question was, who could I trust? The vampire's promises of immortality and power? Or the mysterious figure who claimed I had a greater purpose? A destiny I didn't understand? And what was this ancient power inside me? What was I really capable of? What do you think the ancient power inside the protagonist is? Will they embrace it, or will they fight against it? Who can they trust in the end? The air was thick with tension as I stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city below. The vampire was gone for now, but I knew it was only temporary. The hunger still simmered beneath the surface, its call growing louder with each passing minute. I had made my choice, or so I thought. I had decided to fight, to embrace the power within me, to stand against the darkness. But now, with the weight of the world on my shoulders, I wasn't so sure anymore. The figure had told me that I wasn't alone, that there were others like me. But who were they? Where were they? I didn't have time for answers. The vampire would return, and when he did, I had to be ready. But the choice I was about to make, whether to fully embrace the power I had inherited, or to resist it and fight with everything I had left, wasn't one I could make lightly. Suddenly, I heard the faintest rustle behind me. I turned, my heart pounding, expecting to see the vampire. But it wasn't him. It was the figure again, the mysterious person who had saved me before. You know what's coming, the figure said, their voice low and steady. The vampire won't stop. He will keep coming until you fall, until you embrace what you are. I didn't respond at first. The hunger was rising, clawing at my throat, and I could feel my fangs threatening to emerge. I couldn't keep fighting it forever. The temptation was too strong, too overwhelming. I can't do this alone, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't know what to do. The figure stepped closer, their presence a steady anchor in the storm raging inside me. You are not alone. There are others who have chosen to fight. You can be part of something greater than yourself. Together we can end this. Together we can stop him. I looked down at my hands, my fingers trembling with the weight of the choice I had to make. Was I strong enough to resist the hunger? Was I strong enough to stand against the vampire, even if it meant losing everything I once knew? The figure was waiting for my answer, but I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. And then, the air shifted. I felt it before I saw it. A presence, dark and undeniable, creeping through the shadows. The vampire. He had found me again. You're not getting away from me, the vampire said, his voice a low growl, filled with malice. You belong to me. I've given you a choice, but you've wasted it. Now, you will see what happens when you defy me. I stepped forward, instinctively placing myself between the vampire and the figure. The hunger surged within me, pushing me to act, to fight, to give in to the darkness that called to me. "Stay back," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and defiance. "I won't let you take me." The vampire laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. "You don't have a choice. You can't escape your fate." I could feel the darkness closing in around me, but I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The figure beside me remained silent, but their presence was a steady reminder that I wasn't alone. There was a way out. There had to be. And then, in the silence that followed, the vampire made his move. He lunged forward with lightning speed, his fangs bared, aiming for my throat. But before he could reach me, the figure stepped in front of me, blocking his path. The vampire snarled in frustration. "You're making a mistake." The figure didn't respond, their hand raised, and with a single motion, the air around us seemed to shudder. The vampire staggered back, as if something invisible had struck him, throwing him off balance. "You're not going to win this time," the figure said, their voice calm but filled with authority. The vampire hissed, his eyes blazing with fury. "This is not over. I will come for you. I will always come for you." With that, he vanished, retreating into the shadows, leaving only the echo of his words behind. I stood there, trembling, not knowing what to feel. Relief, fear, confusion. Everything was a blur. The hunger still gnawed at me, but it wasn't as intense. I had a brief moment of clarity. "Why did you help me?" I asked, turning to the figure. "What is this power inside me? Why do I have it?" The figure looked at me, their expression unreadable. "You were chosen because you have the strength to fight what's inside you, to resist the darkness. You can still choose. You can fight or you can fall. But the vampire will not stop. Not until you make your final choice." I stood there, staring at the spot where the vampire had disappeared, the weight of my decision hanging in the air. I had come so far, fought so hard, but now I wasn't sure. The hunger, the darkness, it was always going to be there, lurking, waiting for me to falter. But was I strong enough to resist it? "I don't know what to do," I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips. "You will," the figure said, a faint smile touching their lips. "In the end, you will know what to do." And just like that, they were gone, vanished into the night. I was left standing alone, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. The hunger still there, the darkness still waiting. The battle was far from over, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't run anymore. What do you think the protagonist will choose? Will they embrace the darkness, or will they continue to fight? What is the true power inside them, and how will it shape their future?